John Fetterman falling further. Yeah, John Fetterman. I don't give a shit. I'm not progressive, actually. I'm not. It's like, whatever, who gives a shit? I know. The community note is wild. Yeah, I saw. John Fetterman is so stupid because, I mean, he must have some kind of brain deficiency if he thinks that, like, people are not going to remember how John Fetterman has presented himself as a progressive throughout his entire career. He's doing like a Kirsten Cinema turn here.
I'm John Fetterman, and I'm a Democrat, and I'm a progressive.
It's like, wow, man, he's at Netroots. Like, what the is he doing at Netroots? He's not a progressive. I'm not a progressive. I'm just a regular Democrat, says John Fetterman. I'm just a Democrat running on what I've always believed plus know to be true. John Fetterman, I'm not a progressive. I'm just a regular Democrat. Here's the community notes absolutely hammering his. There are multiple instances of John Fetterman's social media of him claiming to be a progressive. I know people that work for him. It's like kind of wild that he's making this heel turn, and it's really awkward. He has, like, outside of his chief of staff, who is, I don't really know that well, there are plenty of people that I know that works for him on his comms team and These are guys who are like union guys who've like worked with Bernie Sanders' campaign and many other people's campaigns. Like, these are motherfuckers that are like actually leftist people. Is so wild. It's so wild that he's trying to like retcon his image now to make like this weird heel turn to act like he's not a progressive guy, but instead he's just like a regular boring Kirsten Cinema style Democrat, which is weird. I guess not a Kirsten Cinema style Democrat, but still, like, it just doesn't make sense. What does it really matter though? So he has one take about 99% good take, so you want to condemn him on that one shitty take? Seems like missing the forest for the trees. First of all, dumb, that one take has also basically built on top of a bunch of other takes. Here, I'll give you a great example. John Fetterman recently said he's actually, just kidding, he's anti-immigration. Bro, his wife is a immigrant. His wife is Brazilian. The fuck are you talking about? He's literally ran on being pro-immigration from the jump. And now he's acting like it's not just a one take that happens to be pro-genocide. It's literally because of his pro-genocide stance on Israel, which is unceremonious and ridiculous, and he doesn't have to go this hard to begin with. It's not like an apt political calculation for him. Now, on top of that, here's how it's piling on. Here's how it's actually turning into a larger problem. In order to push forward a spending package, an emergency spending package for Israel and also for Ukraine, he has to now capitulate to the Republican Party on an insanely reactionary, insanely white nativist immigration package as well, which unironically goes against immigration. Now we're doing right-wing style immigration reforms, immigration restrictions, rather. So what happened? I thought it was just one take. It's so weird that it doesn't just like end and begin with this one take, which is, oh yeah, you know, I just love the genocide Israel's conducting with our taxpayer dollars, which, by the way, ironically, doesn't even poll well. It is unpopular. The majority want a ceasefire. I don't even give a shit what the majority wants, though. I give a shit about the actual morality of the situation. I am a leftist after all, a progressive. And real progressives aren't just simply making arguments about what is politically favorable. Real progressives, unironically, assume positions, take positions, and advocate for positions that might not necessarily be all that popular, because we don't push for things just because it's going to be popular. We push for things because it's right. Okay? We know that things will inevitably be popular if you can message around it correctly, which the Democratic Party rarely ever does. I think this is a fundamental principle that many people, many young progressives have forgotten about. I think that maybe they took the supposed popularity of progressive values under the Trump administration, because Democrats were negatively polarized against Donald Trump, for granted. I think a lot of people took that for granted. I think a lot of people took the Bernie popularity for granted and started saying like, oh no, it's not just that like we're progressive, our policies are also popular. Sure, some of our policies are genuinely popular, especially on the ballot, but without actual messaging beyond it, obviously some of them are going to be objective failures in the electoral sense. So what you have to do is advocate for these positions, not from the perspective of popularity, but also beyond that, from the perspective of morality.
This is from NBC News saying, I'm not a progressive, John Fetterman says. He's breaking with progressives on hot-button issues with his fiery support for Israel and calling for Democrats to engage on tougher immigration laws, disappointing some on the left as he shows an independent streak. Talk more about this.
He also voted just last week to extend spying authorities as well. I think there has been so much kind of outrage at at Fetterman's kind of over-the-top, unconditional support of everything that Israel has done. He was asked, is Israel committing any war crime? He's like, absolutely not. Not even the question of, well, maybe there have been some that have been alleged. They should be investigated. Like nothing even approaching some sort of accountability or putting some sort of conditions on support for Israel. And so I feel like the criticism is kind of being received, and he's digging in, and now he's finding other ways that he's going to kind of get in little online fights with the left. At the same time, the polling on the border in particular, and the questions around immigration are clear that he's moving toward the easier position there.
Fetterman is from Pittsburgh, where there was a mass synagogue killing. Perhaps it's more personal for him. Yeah, except that's not about Israel. You understand that, right? Like, that person who literally went into the synagogue was a Trump supporter who became even more radical than Trump, and literally went in and detailed exactly why he was trying to kill Jews. He was trying to kill Jewish people because he believed that Jews were actually doing unrestricted immigration that was tarnishing the pure white gene pool in America. So John Fetterman literally turning around and advocating for more strict immigration is more in line with that guy who did the synagogue shooting. Nothing here has anything to do with Israel. That guy didn't go in there and literally was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because like America is giving money to Israel. Like, that's ridiculous. He was a Nazi. Also, Israel does not represent Judaism. Attacking a synagogue because you think you are freeing Palestine is an act of anti-Semitism. Okay? Something that I'm very clear on in general. So remember that. I'm not shitting on you for the record. I'm just saying that is not the case. I know you are looking for any reason to try to make sense of this, but I think it's simply, and I do agree with Edinger Mentum on this a little bit, I think it's simply that John Fetterman's whole shtick is that he just digs his heels in and then will just be like, oh, okay, I'm trolling you. I don't give a like, this is my point, lol. And like, everybody liked it when he was doing it for progressive policies, but it's not funny or cool or makes sense at all when you're doing it for an ongoing genocide that you are unconditionally and vociferously supporting. So that's the difference here. But the attitude from Fetterman is still the same. He's a big baby back. Okay. Did he ever really do any progressive policies? Yeah, of course. He was always a defender of a lot of progressive. Whether it be legalization of marijuana. He was a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, and he was an advocate for legalizing marijuana and other things as well. Like, it's just, he was a pro-immigration. By the way, this part is also the beginning of the end, okay? That he went in and let the pro-Israel lobby edit his Israel-Palestine position in exchange for not nuking him with a super PAC. And then beyond that, he has become this demon. I think he sees that being a conservative Democrat, especially because like Pennsylvania is seen as like purple in some ways, especially the areas that he's supposed to represent. Why do this? Does he think he'll be more popular? Is it all about? I think it's he's just kind of an annoying, right? And when he gets his mind on a certain thing, he just like kind of stands. He just thinks it's good to basically push for whatever the policy is now that he's made up his mind. But beyond that, I think it's a careerist opportunity. The Democratic Party's senatorial lineup is filled to the brim with motherfuckers who are just like John Fetterman, right? Oh, I'm a senator in a kind of red area, in a kind of red state, or a state that could be leaning red, so I'm just going to be a ginormous piece of shit and over my own constituents. Joe Manchin is another example of this. And I think that that's what John Fetterman is positioning himself towards as well. He will be progressive on certain things, probably, or maybe not at all. It sucks because, like, I know what that feels like. I know how quickly that shift happened, and I know it sucks when you like advocate for a person, and as did I, by the way, defended him, advocated for him. You know, a lot of people here might have even literally worked on his campaign, and then all of a sudden, and I know people that work like directly work on his campaign, right? These are progressive people. It just sucks to see someone like that go from perhaps maybe being one of the better contenders for a new left in America, right, to this giant who loves being contrarian and is making light of a ongoing genocide. Anyway, I wanted to briefly cover that for you to understand the situation with John Fetterman. But I also need you to understand another thing. Pro-Palestine has never been a popular position in this goddamn country. This is the most popular it has ever been. As someone who's been at this for the past 10 years, I'm telling you, it has never been this popular in any age demographic. At least now, under the age of 35, it is pretty popular. So, but yet it's still not very popular. Do not let Twitter fool you into thinking that it is. So that's something to also consider. You do not advocate for positions simply because it's popular and you want the Democratic Party to win. You advocate for positions because you think it's a good thing. You think it's good for Americans. I don't care if Medicare for All polls well. I care that Medicare for All will legitimately help people, will help every American be rid of medical debt. This is something that a lot of people forget in this space, because I think a lot of you became political actors or politically minded at a time when the Democratic Party was, not in power in 2020, leading up to 2020, when the Democratic Party had no power. So you had the likes of even Kamala Harris saying that they were pro-Medicare for all. But that is a lie. They are not. They are not actually pro-Medicare for all. They could just simply vote on that because they knew that the optics of it would look good. They could get their progressive bona fides. However, they didn't actually ever have to act on it, specifically because Donald Trump was in power. And Democrats were radicalized against, negatively polarized against Trump. Democratic voters, I mean. So make no mistake, this does not necessarily mean that your positions are always going to be popular. You're not advocating for these positions because they're popular. You're advocating for these positions because they're right, okay? As long as the Democrats can sit on their ass and threaten minorities into voting for them, they will never pass progressive policies. Like Angela Davis says, we cannot rely on governments regardless of who is in power to do the work only mass movements can do. Yes, except the Democratic Party is no longer even defending minorities is the point. As the calculation on the ground changes, as the Democratic Party makes major gains, as Joe Biden did, with the older white constituencies, because Joe Biden right now is within striking distance of Donald Trump, according to current polling, only because of the suburban moderate whites that are, Republican Party voters that think Trump is gross. Not because, the Democratic Party is, legitimately profoundly popular amongst marginalized populations in general. And that mental calculation, that electoral calculation is showing up in the way that they legislate. Why am I talking about this, by the way? Why am I talking about the immigration policy? Because the immigration policy is supposed to be one of the major differences between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. Biden positioned himself as the guy who wasn't going to lock up immigrants for no reason, right? And then he got bullied over and over again. And then he continued building the Trump wall as recently as in the past couple of months. What good is okay, Biden isn't pushing for build the wall as a campaign message, but it doesn't change anything. Ostensibly, he's doing the same Look, see, people are already positioning themselves. Look, 10-month subscriber. This election isn't about Biden. It's about defeating MAGA once and for all. And that is a falsehood. Why is that a falsehood? Well, let me explain to you why that's a falsehood. Because if the Biden administration ends up making gains in the margins for certain things while simultaneously taking some of the more important differences, like policy differences that they are supposed to have with the Republican right, and make them permanent, like Title 42, which is insane, then it doesn't matter. One side is more aggressive and messages in a more racist way. The other side says, actually, we're not racist, but we're still going to do the same policies. Allowing illegal immigrants who have jobs in the United States to apply for legal status, a Fox News poll, 62% favor it, okay? 62%. Now, let me explain something to you. Americans are really fucked up in the way that they operate as well. Because simultaneously, they will literally, the American voter, the median American voter, has this opinion while also simultaneously thinks that the average immigrant is a rapist and needs to be immediately deported. And you're like, how do you have these two opinions at the same time? That's precisely how you arrive at Republican Party voters that unironically are in favor of amnesty, that also are championing the build the wall narrative. One thing that I always have to mention to you, and this is something that I've been saying for the past 10 years now. Democrats do this thing that is incredibly damaging, where they take a right-wing reactionary false premise that the Republicans move with, like immigrants are rapists, drug dealer, murderers, right? Or this idea that like immigrants are bad, right? Democrats don't counter message against that and say, no, immigrants are good, actually. They sit back and they wait for that message to become the permanent message. And then they poll on immigration issues and they find out that people believe the Republican Party's lies and actually have a more reactionary approach to immigration in the country. So then what did the Democrats do? Well, they go, okay, we are also restrictive on immigration. We're just like we're maybe a little bit less restrictive than the Republicans, but we're also restrictive on immigration. When you do that, when you cede ground on right-wing framing on an issue, all you do is make this issue a reality, even if it is built around a false premise, a lie that immigrants are more predisposed towards crime, for example. That's a lie. There's no evidence for this. As a matter of fact, the only evidence, which is limited, shows the exact opposite of that. Right? The problem is Democrats don't counter message and show the truth. Republicans flood the market with falsehoods. And then Americans are like, well, okay, well, if immigrants are rapists, then, we should do something about it. Right? Understandably, that's what you're going to see. If that's all you're hearing as an average American, you're going to be like, what the fuck? I don't want rapists in my neighborhood. What the fuck is this shit? Right? So then they say they want more restrictive immigration. And then the Democrats say, okay, we'll give you more restrictive immigration. All you've done is cede ground to the Republicans on this issue. And no matter what, Republicans are always going to be able to beat you in that game. You cannot outflank the Republicans on patriotism. You cannot outflank the Republican Party on immigration. You cannot outflank the Republican Party on reactionary attitudes. That's their bread and butter. It is so stupid. No one, and I mean no one, is going to poll and say Democrats are better on immigration if the majority think a false premise that immigrants are a problem in this country is a reality. You're not going to be able to outflank the Republicans on that. So all you've done now is basically turn this conversation away from the reality that immigration is not a problem in this country to basically conceding that it is a problem in this country. You are never going to be able to defeat the Republicans on this. Another thing that happened was crime. Democrat-run cities are hotbeds of crime. Every red state has a higher murder rate. Okay, every red state in comparison to every blue state has a higher murder rate, higher rates of gun violence, higher rates for murder. And yet, if you ask Americans, they think, Democrat-run cities are hotbeds of crime. Hotbeds of crime. There's so much crime happening in Democrat-run cities, Democrat-run states. Why did you not counter message around that? Why did you capitulate to the falsehoods? Why did you cede ground to the Republicans? They will always win. The crime is a real issue and they're killing everyone in these blue cities and blue states. They will always win. They will always win that front. You cannot look at the Republican Party being like, we should be able to say the N-word and then go, you know what? That's actually true. You should be able to say the N-word. We're going to say it, but we're going to say it with a soft A, and then have people vote for you because they're going to be saying it with a hard R. They're always going to go right. If you allow that to even happen, if you allow this to be like the norm, the normal opinion, if you don't counter message against that and go, no, actually, you shouldn't be able to say that. What the fuck are you doing? Republicans are always going to win that battle. So this isn't just like fuck the Democratic Party. I'm putting my electoralist hat on here. I'm putting my DNC operative hat on here and saying, Democrats, wake the fuck up. You cannot win elections if you do not show the population that you are different than the Republican Party. If you do not show the population that you are genuinely different, not marginally, but genuinely different than the Republicans, and you do not counter message against the fake bullshit that the Republican Party is spouting by way of all matter of communications from Fox News all the way down to the average YouTuber, you're going to lose. You're always going to lose. You're allowing the country to lose. You're allowing the country to become more and more right-wing. Now, of course, if I take the electoralist hat off for a second and look at it with a more macro perspective, look at it from the outside, then, of course, I will say that, of course, it's a bourgeois democracy and both parties are aligned on this agenda, aligned on the agenda of more reactionary policy because ultimately they're operating at the behest of the same corporate benefactors. They are still there to defend capitalism. The Democratic Party is most successful at shutting off any kind of leftist momentum, to provide a bottleneck for any kind of real leftist momentum in this country, because they too fear material changes, okay?